Why are you standing outside my building? You need to leave, now.
I'm on a public sidewalk waiting for my Lyft. I'm not bothering you.
People like you always say that. You're making me feel unsafe.
People like me? You mean black. Say it on camera.
I'm calling the police. Suspicious male refusing
Perfect.
to
Tell
leave.
them I'm black and doing nothing. Let's document.
Sarah Miller had lived in the historic Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston for 6 years, residing in a renovated brownstone on a cobblestone street where property values had skyrocketed and the demographics had shifted noticeably whiter. She had never filed a police report before, never had a reason to call 911, and never considered herself racist. She voted for liberal candidates, donated to social causes, and shared articles about equality on social media. But when she saw me standing outside her building on a brisk November afternoon, something in her brain activated suspicion, the certainty that I didn't belong. That instinct, shaped by unexamined bias and media narratives about danger, would trigger a chain of events that ended in her viral humiliation, a lawsuit she'd lose spectacularly, and a $2.5 million judgment that would follow her for the rest of her life. On that November afternoon in Boston, everything changed for both of us. My name is Marcus Thorne. I had just finished a client meeting at a coffee shop on Charles Street, 3 blocks away. I'm a freelance graphic designer, 29 years old, building my business one client at a time. I had just pitched a rebranding strategy to a local boutique owner. The meeting had gone perfectly. I stepped outside to wait for my Lyft, standing on the public sidewalk in front of a residential brownstone, scrolling through my phone, planning my afternoon. I was wearing a navy hoodie under a denim jacket, chinos, and Timberland boots. I was minding my business. I was doing nothing wrong. But to Sarah Miller, who emerged from her building carrying groceries, my presence was threatening. My blackness was suspicious. My stillness was lurking. And her fear, completely unfounded and rooted in bias, would destroy both our afternoons and reshape both our futures. Before I continue telling you what happened to me, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like mine need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Beacon Hill, Boston, a neighborhood that represents old money and new gentrification, where gas lamps line the streets and condos sell for millions. It's a place where the demographics have shifted from a mix of students and families to predominantly wealthy white professionals. According to recent census data, while Boston is diverse, neighborhoods like this remain statistically isolated, with black residents making up less than 3% of the immediate area's population. The streets were clean, the sidewalks brick, the sense of ownership palpable. This was a neighborhood where people felt entitled to decide who belonged and who looked suspicious. I grew up in Roxbury, a neighborhood where police presence often meant harassment, not protection. I worked hard to build something different. I earned a design degree from Boston University, interned at agencies that underpaid and overworked me, then struck out on my own. Freelancing was unpredictable, but it was mine. I set my hours. I chose my clients. I built brands that actually worked. That afternoon, I'd landed a significant contract. 3 months of work, excellent money. I was feeling accomplished, optimistic, ready to celebrate. I called a Lyft. The app showed the driver was 4 minutes away. I stood on the sidewalk about 15 feet from the entrance to the brownstone, checking emails. The weather was cold but crisp. Late autumn in New England. I was relaxed, unbothered, just a man waiting for a ride. Sarah Miller emerged from the building carrying 2 bags of groceries from Trader Joe's. She was 36 years old, worked in HR for a biotech firm, and lived alone in a condo she bought with a trust fund. She considered herself aware, educated progressive. She participated in the Women's March. She read the bestsellers on anti-racism. But none of that awareness had actually penetrated the deeper layers of her conditioning, the subconscious associations between blackness and danger. Research shows that implicit bias is pervasive. A study by the American Psychological Association indicates that individuals, regardless of their declared beliefs, often subconsciously associate black men with threat at a significantly higher rate than white men. Sarah saw me standing on the sidewalk, and something in her chest tightened. A black man, hood up, standing still too close to her building. Her mind didn't consider that I might live there, might be visiting someone, or might be waiting for a ride. Her mind went straight to threat, to danger, to the need to do something. She pulled out her phone and started recording, not to document my behavior, but to document what she'd already decided I was doing: lurking, threatening, not belonging. I noticed her staring, noticed her phone pointed at me. I'd been through this before. The suspicious looks, the clutched purses, the assumptions. I sighed internally and made a decision. If she was going to record me, I'd record her too. Documentation, protection, evidence. In case this went sideways, I opened my camera app and started recording. That's when Sarah spoke. "You think you'll scare me with your phone?" I kept my voice calm, even though my heart rate was climbing. "No, I'm just protecting myself." Sarah took a step closer, her voice rising. "Protecting yourself from what? I'm the one who should be scared. You're standing way too close to my building." I gestured to the street. "I'm waiting for my ride. That's all." My Lyft was 3 minutes away. Sarah's tone dripped with skepticism and fear masquerading as authority. "People like you always say that." I felt the familiar anger surge. "People like me," meaning black. Dog. Sarah's face flushed, but she didn't back down. "If you didn't want people to assume things, you wouldn't be lurking around." My voice stayed measured, but my words were sharp. "I'm not lurking. I'm standing on a sidewalk, and the only dangerous thing here is your imagination. Do you think residents should face consequences for racially profiling people in public spaces? Drop your answer below." Sarah pulled out her phone, no longer recording, but dialing. "I'm calling the police. There's a suspicious person outside my building refusing to leave." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly how this could go. I'd seen the videos, read the stories. Data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics highlights that black drivers and pedestrians are pulled over or stopped at a rate disproportionate to their population share compared to white citizens. Being a suspicious person is a dangerous label. Suspicious person. That's what you're telling them. That I'm suspicious for standing on a public sidewalk waiting for my car. Sarah was already speaking to the 911 operator. "Yes, there's a black male outside my building. He's been here for several minutes. He's recording me on his phone. I don't feel safe. The address is 142 Mount Vernon Street." I kept my phone recording, making sure to capture her words. "I want everyone to hear this. I'm waiting for a lift. I've been here for maybe 5 minutes. I haven't approached her, haven't touched her, haven't threatened her. I'm literally just standing here, and she's calling the police because I'm black in her neighborhood." A few other people on the street had started to notice. A white man in his 50s, walking a golden retriever, stopped and watched. An Asian woman pushing a stroller slowed down. Someone across the street pulled out their phone and started recording too. Sarah didn't notice or didn't care. She was focused on me, convinced of her narrative, certain she was the victim. "The police are on their way," she said, her voice shaking with what she believed was justified fear. "You can explain to them why you're here." "I don't need to explain anything to anyone. I'm on a public sidewalk. I have every right to be here, but sure, let's wait for the police. Let's see how they respond to a white woman calling them on a black man who's doing absolutely nothing wrong." My Lyft was 2 minutes away. I could see the car on the app driving up Charles Street, but I didn't move. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of saying I fled. I stood my ground phone recording, documenting everything. The man, walking his dog, approached cautiously. "Excuse me, miss. I've been watching. This man hasn't done anything. He's just been standing there on his phone. Why did you call the police?" See. Sarah turned to him, her confidence wavering slightly. "He's been loitering, standing right outside my building. It's suspicious." The man shook his head. "Loitering. He's waiting for a ride. You can see him checking his phone. There's nothing suspicious here except your assumptions." Another voice chimed in. The woman with the stroller had stopped. "I've been recording too." She pointed at Sarah. "You called the police before he did anything." She said, "People like you. This is racial profiling, plain and simple." Sarah's face went from flushed to pale. "I'm not racist. I just felt unsafe." Feeling unsafe doesn't give you the right to weaponize the police against someone who hasn't threatened you. The dog walker's voice was firm. "You've just put this man in danger because of your feelings." My Lyft pulled up. A silver Toyota Camry. The driver looked confused by the scene. I held up one finger, signaling to wait. "I'm not leaving until the police get here because I want them to see exactly what happened. I want a record of this." Sirens approached. 2 patrol cars, 4 officers. They parked and got out, hands near their belts, eyes scanning for the threat they'd been told to expect. One officer, a white man in his 40s, approached me first. "Sir, we got a call about a suspicious person. Can I see some ID?" I kept my phone recording, but raised my hands slightly, making sure they were visible. "Officer, before I do anything, I need you to know I'm recording this interaction. I'm also being recorded by multiple witnesses. I was standing on this public sidewalk waiting for my Lyft. This woman," I gestured to Sarah, "called 911 because she decided I look suspicious. I haven't committed any crime. I haven't threatened anyone. I've been standing here for about 7 minutes total." The second officer, a black woman in her 30s, looked at Sarah, then at me, then at the small crowd that had gathered. "Ma'am, what exactly did this individual do that made you call 911? Sarah's voice was defensive. "He was loitering outside my building, standing there for a long time. I didn't recognize him. He made me feel unsafe." The female officer's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the recognition in her eyes. She'd seen this before. "How long is a long time?" "I don't know, several minutes." "And did he approach you, threaten you try to enter the building?" "No." "But did he say anything to you before you spoke to him?" No, but his presence—" "Officer," I interjected, "I want to be clear. I want to press charges for false reporting and harassment. This woman called 911 and reported a suspicious black male as a threat when I was doing nothing but waiting for my car. She racially profiled me. She put me in danger by bringing armed police to a situation that didn't exist. This is a crime." The white male officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, let's just calm down and figure out what happened." I am calm, but I'm also aware of my rights. False police reports are illegal. Racially motivated harassment is illegal. I was standing on a public sidewalk. I have witnesses. I have video. She had no legitimate reason to call you, except that she saw a black man and decided he was a threat. Should false 911 calls, motivated by racial bias, carry criminal penalties? Let me know what you think. The female officer turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, can you describe exactly what threatening behavior you observed?" Sarah stammered. "He was just standing there in a hoodie looking around." Looking around is not a crime. The officer's tone was patient but firm. Standing on a sidewalk is not a crime. Did you ask him what he was doing before you called us? Is I no, but I didn't feel safe. The officer glanced at my phone, still recording. Sir, you said you have video of the interaction. Yes, ma'am. From the moment she confronted me, it's all here. Her calling me people like you, her admitting she called because I'm black, her refusing to accept that I'm waiting for a ride. Multiple witnesses also recorded it. The crowd murmured agreement. The man with the dog spoke up. Officer, I saw the whole thing. He did nothing threatening. She profiled him and called you. It's on video. The officer looked at her partner, then back at Sarah. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Making a false police report is a crime. If you called 911 because someone was standing on a public sidewalk and you had no actual basis to believe they were a threat, that's a problem. Sarah's voice rose. I felt threatened. Feelings aren't facts. The black female officer's voice was steel now, and weaponizing those feelings by calling police on a black man who's doing nothing wrong is dangerous. People have died because of calls like yours. My Lyft driver had been watching the whole thing, his window down. Yo, man, I'm your driver. You called for a ride to Seaport, right, or Sham? I nodded. Yes, that's my ride. That's what I've been waiting for. That's all I've been doing. The white officer sighed. Sir, you're free to go. You've committed no crime. You don't even need to show us ID because you weren't engaged in any suspicious activity. I appreciate that, officer, but I'm filing a formal complaint. I want this woman charged with false reporting. I want a paper trail because next time she might call on someone else, and they might not have witnesses or cameras, and it might end very differently. You have every right to file a complaint. The female officer handed me a card. Here's the case number and precinct information. Come in any time to make a formal statement. I took the card, then looked at Sarah. You could have gotten me killed today. You know that, right? You called armed police on a black man because you didn't like that he was standing near your building. You didn't ask questions. You didn't use common sense. You just decided I was dangerous because of how I look. And you felt entitled to use the police as your personal security force against people you don't think belong in your neighborhood. Sarah was crying now. I'm sorry, I was scared. You weren't scared. You were racist. There's a difference. And now the whole internet is going to see exactly what you did. I got in my Lyft and left. The police dispersed. The witnesses uploaded their videos to social media. Within 3 hours, the hashtag started trending. Within 6 hours, Sarah Miller had been identified. Within 12 hours, her employer had been flooded with calls and emails. Within 24 hours, she'd been fired. The video was everywhere. Ring doorbell footage from across the street captured the entire confrontation from another angle. Cell phone videos from 4 different witnesses. Sarah calling 911. Her people like you comment. My calm responses. The police arriving and finding absolutely nothing wrong. The headlines wrote themselves. White woman calls cops on black man waiting for Lyft. Boston woman fired for racist 911 call. Marcus Thorne files criminal charges, false police report. The district attorney reviewed the video evidence and decided to prosecute. Sarah was charged with a misdemeanor. She pleaded guilty in a plea deal, received probation, community service, and a permanent record. But the legal consequences were nothing compared to the social and financial ones. I filed a civil lawsuit, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, violation of civil rights. The case was straightforward. Video evidence showed Sarah had no basis for her call. Witnesses testified she'd racially profiled me. Her own words, people like you, demonstrated bias. Her employer confirmed she'd been terminated for conduct inconsistent with company values. Sarah's attorney tried to argue she genuinely felt afraid, but the evidence destroyed that defense. The video showed me standing calmly, not approaching, not threatening. Her own 911 call revealed she described me as suspicious solely based on my presence, not my actions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They awarded me $2.5 million in damages. Sarah had no assets close to that. Her condo was mortgaged. Her savings were minimal. The judgment would follow her for decades. Wages garnished credit, destroyed job prospects limited because her name and face were permanently associated with racist 911 calls. I used the settlement money to launch a non-profit lens on justice focused on educating people of color about how to document and respond to racial profiling. I partnered with civil rights attorneys. I created Know Your Rights cards. I spoke at community centers and schools. I turned my trauma into advocacy. I testified before the Boston City Council about the dangers of weaponized 911 calls. When Sarah Miller called the police on me, I said my voice steady. She turned her bias into a potential death sentence. I was armed with nothing but my phone and my dignity. But she told police there was a suspicious black male. She created a threat narrative that didn't exist, and 4 armed officers responded ready for danger. I paused. I had witnesses. I had video. I stayed calm. I knew my rights. But what about the people who don't? What about the delivery drivers, the visitors, the residents who get profiled and don't have cameras running? What happens to them when someone decides their presence is suspicious and calls it in as a threat? The council chamber was silent. If we don't create consequences for people who weaponize police against people of color, we're complicit in the system that puts us in danger. Sarah Miller faced a misdemeanor and a lawsuit. But how many others have done the same thing and faced nothing? How many have called police on black people existing in public spaces and walked away with no accountability? Boston passed an ordinance 6 months later, similar to others popping up around the country making false, racially motivated 911 calls a specific offense with enhanced penalties, fines up to $10,000, mandatory bias training, and civil liability for damages. The law was symbolic, but it sent a message. Sarah Miller became a case study. Universities used her story in sociology courses about implicit bias. Law schools analyzed the lawsuit in civil rights classes. Diversity trainings showed the video as an example of how bias operates even in people who consider themselves progressive. My message never changed. This isn't about Sarah being uniquely evil. This is about a system that teaches white people their fear of black people is reasonable and should be acted on. This is about neighborhoods that use police as tools to maintain racial homogeneity. This is about the assumption that black people in certain spaces are automatically suspicious and need to justify their presence. Sarah Miller is facing consequences. That's accountability. I received a settlement. That's some measure of justice. But money and court judgments don't change the fact that I was put in danger for standing on a sidewalk. They don't address the thousands of other black people who face similar profiling and never get justice. They don't fix the underlying bias that makes white people see black bodies as threats. The real question is what changes now? Do people finally examine their own biases before calling police? Do they finally understand that their discomfort isn't evidence of danger? Do they finally accept that public spaces belong to everyone and black people don't need to justify their existence in neighborhoods, on sidewalks, in parks, anywhere? Because if we don't address the bias that made Sarah Miller see me as a threat, if we don't challenge the entitlement that made her feel she could weaponize police against me, if we don't create real consequences that make people think twice before making that call, then we're just waiting for the next video, the next confrontation, the next black person who might not survive someone else's racist imagination. My nonprofit grew rapidly. We hired 3 full-time staff. We partnered with legal defense funds. We created an app that allowed people to document interactions with one tap. I trained community leaders in 50 cities. I turned my 7 minutes of terror on a Boston sidewalk into a movement. But the personal cost stayed with me. The anxiety every time I stood in public spaces. The hyper-awareness of who was watching me and how they might interpret my presence. The exhaustion of knowing that my mere existence could be perceived as threatening. Therapy helped, community helped, purpose helped, but the trauma remained, a scar that wouldn't fully heal. Sarah Miller disappeared from public view. She deleted her social media. She moved out of Massachusetts to a small town where no one knew her face. She worked service jobs. The judgment followed her, garnishing 15% of every paycheck for years. She gave one interview 2 years later saying she was working on her biases, but the internet never forgot. Her name remains synonymous with the consequences of weaponized fear. The witnesses who recorded that day said they'd never forget it. The way I stayed calm while Sarah escalated. The way I documented everything while she panicked. They said it changed how they saw their own neighborhoods, their own assumptions, their own silence when they witnessed injustice. Comment below if you think false racially motivated 911 calls should carry felony charges, not just misdemeanors. And if you believe stories like mine need to be told, if you think accountability matters, and racial profiling starts with individuals making choices based on bias, then hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding that people examine their fear. We're going to keep fighting for a world where a man can wait for his Lyft without someone deciding he's suspicious. This isn't just about Sarah Miller and Marcus Thorne. It's about all of us, and whether we're willing to challenge racism when it's dressed up as safety concerns.